what David Hume says, some Bible about miracles, is not like, oh, we just assume that miracles can happen. He says that the bulk of our experience shows that miracles don't happen. He also says that there are too many miracles that have already been disproved, that if we get a new claim miracle, then it's more likely to be also a hoax or a fake.
The problem with David Hume is he also has dogma too. He said that if God existed, we would expect to see God reveal himself to us in a way. Mm-hmm. Who is Jesus Christ? Right. Yeah. So like David Hume rejects the miracle right off its face value. So it's that counterfeit money explanation. Of course, there's counterfeit money out there, but we know real money exists, right? So just because there's counterfeit miracles doesn't mean that there is no miracles. I think we actually have a large amount of evidence for miracles. And I think one of the biggest ones is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Anthony Flew, which was another atheist philosopher, says the most convincing miracle in history, if he was ever going to be convinced of one, would be Jesus Christ's resurrection.
All right.
What's up, bro? How you doing?
Good, and you?
Good.
So
what's up today?
Last time you were talking about undesigned coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping we could talk about it a little bit. So, there is a scholar called Mike Licona. He's very famous, one of the top apologists. There was an interview in Sean McDowell, and he said that he doesn't think undesigned coincidences are like very strong. That he's not very convinced by this. And
yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of Mike Licona's apologetics.
Okay.
So I disagree with him.
Okay, I see. But I think for so many undesigned consequences, they are feel to me like a weak connections, but they are like apologists try too hard to find connections between this. It doesn't seem very strong to me.
Why?
I think there is one good one, the one of Philip and the
Gospel of John,
Philip of Bethsaida, yeah. I think that's the only one that one says, okay, that's a really good one. I think the rest are not so strong. I mean, it seems like the connection was weak. And I tell you why.
How many have you read?
Because, many of them. I watched all of Testify videos on this. Do you know Eric from Testify?
I know Eric, yeah.
That's a great, that's my favorite apologist. He has a long series on undesigned consequence, and I watched them all.
Okay, but the problem is that you're saying it's not convincing to you. Fine, but do you have an explanation for him?
Okay, yeah, let me give you one.
Okay.
Eric likes to make this analogy. Imagine there is a robbery, and there are two witnesses. One says that the thief had untied shoes, and the other one says that the thief tripped. Right. So Eric says that this will be an undesigned coincidence because it makes because it fits with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: it only works if the two witnesses are completely independent. I think if the both witnesses talk to each other, or if one witness heard the other witness talk before, I think this reduces the strength over the same.
Right. So again, you're telling me why you're not convinced of it. I'm asking you for an explanation for him.
Yeah.
So for example, there's undesigned coincidences where John is explained by Matthew, and then there's undesigned coincidences where Matthew is explained by John, where it works in the reverse order. There's also the fact that these undesigned coincidences, you'll find contradictions in the undesigned coincidences. If the intent was to copy or do these weird things, how did they end up being these very small things that ended up coming to fruition? That's the question I'm asking. Just before you answer, Upseas came in with $6.99. When Jesus said, "Those who will do great works than me," why do we never see that happen with miracles of healing, etc.? And why don't we see that? We do all the time. You guys just reject it. I don't know if you reject it specifically, but we literally have miracles all the time. We have videos of people being healed, eyes being healed, getting out of wheelchairs, audio tapes, and you guys all say it's made up and fake or some sort of illusion or some undesigned natural phenomena. Paulo Alalo came in with $5, says, "John, I have a family member that's dealing with cancer on her throat. Can you pray for her, please?" We will do that real quick. Lord, I ask that you help this man's family member who's dealing with cancer. Ultimately, it's within your power to take it away. So Lord, I plead with you. I know you can do it. So Lord, take away that cancer in Jesus' name. Amen. Sorry, bro. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. No, it's because the reason why is because I don't think the gospel are like completely independent. So that will be like my reason. So you say there are contradictions in the undesigned consequence. Are the contradictions really in the undesigned coincidences, or are there?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example.
Else?
So in the Gospel of John, he talks about many people coming and going, right?
Yeah.
And then in the Gospel of, I think it's Matthew or Mark, I forget. We can look it up if we need to. He says it's because of Passover. So that's explained. The many coming and going is because of Passover. So that's an undesigned coincidence. And I'm going through a lot of things here in small. In the Gospel of John, he stands on top of a mountain and he sees all the people coming and going. The Gospel of Mark, he's standing by the water by a boat. That's a contradiction. If John was reading Mark and saying, okay, we're going to copy this and we're going to fill in this information and we're going to just fill that in, you would not expect to see such a drastic contradiction from a verse that's right beside each other. So there's a direct contradiction between the two, yet they explain each other. Why does this happen?
Okay, I see. Well, I will have to look at I think it could be that John read in Mark and he deduced it must have been Passover, because there were people coming and going, I could also be, John doesn't say it was Passover, so it could also be like.
But there, so I skipped a lot of things there. So he reads it. He says, could have been Passover, many coming and going. But John also fills in the location. He says that Jesus is in his hometown, which is on the west bank of Galilee. And on the west bank of Galilee is the specific road people would have come and gone for Passover. Okay. So that's another undesigned coincidence that fills into that. How did he know that?
Okay. Well, I don't, maybe just. Was this the only place where people were coming and going?
Yeah, so this would have been the primary Roman road that would have been used.
Yeah, he would have deduced it. They must have been on that road because people were coming and going.
Yes, so how did John know that if he wasn't there?
You know what? He knew he had general knowledge of which place people go and come in Passover.
How?
He had some general knowledge because he was from the area and the time.
Okay, so John was there.
He was not there when the events happened, but he was from around the region and around the same time, around the 1st century.
So hold on, I'm just going to answer this real quick. Yeah. Comes in 699, says, do you have any sources for miracles I can look at? Also, why do some of the people not get healed? How can we make sure that they aren't placebo? Yeah, so Craig Keener got about 3 or 4 books on miracles that you can look at. So Craig Keener, miracles, you'll find the data and the information. Yeah, so you got John in the location.
Yeah, I got John, the author of John, from around the region, from Palestine then in some point.
So he had to be in the region. He also had to be a Jew, correct?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay, so he was a Jew who was in the region and during the time.
But not during the time. Not in the 30.
Okay, so if it's not during the time, hold on. If it's not during the time, what happened in 70 AD?
Okay.
What happened?
Okay, the destruction of the temple.
Mm-hmm. What happened to the Jews after 70 AD?
They got, I'm not sure, they got scattered.
Scattered, pretty much wiped out. Cultures and customs are pretty much gone at that point, including a lot of their writings. So John, it comes after this, right?
He wrote.
How does he know this?
He wrote after this, but maybe he lived before it, or maybe people told him because.
Okay, so John lived before it. So John would have been an author from that time period in that location.
Right. I mean, from around the time period, like he's old enough to have witnessed it, to have lived before it, but not that old as to have witnessed it, being a first-hand witness of Jesus.
Right. So now you're kind of playing like a semantic game, right? So he would have been at the time before 70 AD, but not old enough to actually know Jesus. He also would have been Jew and understood the culture and the people. Now you got to come up with a theory on why a Jew who lived in that time period, who understood the culture, would invent this narrative.
I don't. Why would they invent this narrative? It's the same reason why all the religious texts in the world exist. Why some people invented other religious texts.
That's like a vague hand waving, right? Riley Morgan comes into $10, says, "God bless you. God bless you too, man." And you're just kind of saying, I'm not convinced by it. Yet the best explanation for these things is that he was a person who lived in the area and is recording true events. That's the best explanation. is that we have the author, who is John, who understands, because the Gospel of John has the most thorough understanding of Jewish practices out of all the Gospels.
Yeah.
Right. He has a deep understanding of geography on how it works. And he would have been alive in that period. So we have a guy who understands Judaism, is in that time period, and understands the geography. Why would we assume that he's making up a story when these stories directly align with true events?
Yeah, but about the time when he was, for example, if he was born in the year 50, it will make him 20 by the time the destruction of the temple happened. But so he will know about these things. But he was born 20 years after Jesus died. You know what I mean? There is a big range of age that works. You know, he doesn't necessarily have to be alive.
So you're ginning up an apologetic. What you're doing is you're inventing any sort of scenario where it's like, as long as it sounds remotely possible, you could say it's likely. What I'm saying is my hypothesis has the best conclusion considering all the data. Your hypothesis is possible.
Okay. So what is you're saying that because John has knowledge of the area and he's from around the period, then anything that he writes is automatically true?
No, what I'm saying is he's also trying to record true events that we can see that are happening. So a lot of things the scholars agree on, right? Like John the Baptist. John writes about John the Baptist. Josephus writes about John the Baptist. He gets the locations right. He gets the area. He gets the movement. He gets the culture. He gets all these things correct, right? But then all of a sudden, like when we get to just miracle events, it's made up or invented. But all natural events, nobody ever contests that John's making these up or it's invented.
Okay, I see your point then. Well, Bart Ehrman has a response to this argument, you know, about the too many details that are confirmed. He says, for example, what about a future historian saw today's fake news? He saw that there was an article about Bart Ehrman, who works at the Illinois University, and there was a bomb and blew off. And what if this historian confirmed that Bart Ehrman was indeed real and working at this university, but the bomb was a lie? So it can happen that
right. So I agree with that. I agree with that hypothetical, which is why I think the undesigned coincidences are so strong, because it's not Bart Ehrman's alive or he was a professor. It's very specific locations, very small connections. Things like the undesigned coincidences are, I think, things that are so strong because nobody noticed them for like 1,000 years. Nobody talked about them for over 1,000 years. And this is not something somebody would invent to fulfill a narrative or to lie. These are small things that people would talk about as if they were in the situation, talking about the event. You said the Philip, right, being from Bethsaida is a strong event, right? This is the same area where we're doing an undesigned coincidence. It's the Passover time. It's the feeding of the 5,000. The people are coming. This is all within the same area. So we're talking about that text where he knew Philip and Bethsaida. Why would he invent such a weird narrative? It seems to be, when you take all these things and you put them together, the best explanation is John is trying to record a true event.
Okay.
But what if sorry, and I know it's like I forget if I don't do it, so it's not you, bro. You're an awesome guy. ALC comes in with $5, says atheist William Bennett in the late 1800s was skeptical of the Book of Acts, went to the Middle East, reacted to Paul's steps, and became a Christian. That is true. All right, so go ahead, bro.
So I think maybe another hypothesis is that John and Mark or Matthew, they are looking at the same common oral traditions, but writing it like specifics, in their own way. So that's why we get like matches or coincidence, because they have a common oral tradition, like it could be.
Okay, so let's go to one of my favorite then. Do you know the undesigned coincidence of Archelius?
I'm not. I don't remember you. I think you mentioned that one last time. Yeah, I'm not remember it very well. Yeah.
Okay, so the Gospel of Matthew, very specifically, Joseph is fleeing, right? He's fleeing from Egypt, going towards Judea, and then he runs into the Jews, and he says it doesn't even say he runs into the Jews. He just says he doesn't go to Judea because he's too afraid of Archelius, and that's all that's explained. And then he doesn't go back to Judea; he flees to another town. That's one sentence in the Gospel of Matthew.
Right.
Nothing else talked about Archelius. We go read what Josephus says about Archelius. Archelius was the son of Herod, who took over after Herod died, and he just started reigning. He never became king. The word that's used in Matthew just says reigning. Doesn't say King Herod or King Archelius, right? Because we have King Herod. Doesn't say King Archelius. says Archelius is reigning. It's very important because he reigned for 15 years, was never made king by Caesar. That's a very small detail, right?
Okay.
He's reigning, and as he's reigning, he gets in a headbutting contest with the Jews at the temple because some stupid squander happened. And then what ends up happening is at the end of the headbutting contest, Archelius sends his soldiers and he kills a whole bunch of Jews in the temple. Well, what do the Jews do? They flee. Where would they flee? Towards Egypt. That's the direction that they would have came from. So they flee towards Egypt. Who was coming from Egypt? Joseph, right?
Yeah.
So what would be the reason Joseph would have been afraid of Archelius?
Because some Jews told him about this?
Because
he heard about this and they're killing.
Right. Okay. Now this is a very important thing. Remember, he only reigned for 15 years. This is a very small period of time. How does the Gospel of Matthew get such a small detail correct?
Did Matthew say that? What's the detail? That he reigned for 15 years?
It says Archelius, who was reigning at the time. Joseph was afraid of Archelius, who was reigning, so he didn't go to Judea. That's all it says.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that's detail. That's a detail that everyone will know. With this,
how would everyone know that? How would someone know that? Because again, you said you gave the argument that these people might have came. They might have been born 20 years before 70 AD, right? Which would make them 20 years old. Right. Archelius is not a big name. He's only wrote about by Josephus later on. We have no other writings about Archelius. So again, how did he know of this one event so small to put it in the gospel?
Okay. Do you think for a person born like in the 5th century, it would have been nearly impossible to know what the king was called 20 years ago? This was super difficult.
I don't think it would have been impossible, but I think it would have been very hard.
Okay.
Right. I think what's more likely is that he was there.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. But I think if they were they managed to create some very good works of literature, so this means they might have been highly educated, the authors.
Right.
And if they were educated, maybe they knew because of this.
Right. So this is where I think the undesigned coincidence becomes strong. Each individual one you can explain away like that. But we start doing them all together, and we put them all together. We go, that's a lot of coincidences. That's a lot of these would be the most intelligent writers in the world putting together this narrative with all these small little lies that nobody picks up on. Okay. And another example of this is the gospel, going back to the Gospel of John. We all remember the story of give to Caesar what is Caesar, right? Is that John? I don't remember. Anyways, one of the gospels. You know the story, give to Caesar what is Caesar.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know the quote. I know the phrase, but I'm not exactly right. I don't know with the story around it.
Okay, so
I know this quote, the sentence. I know it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So what happens in the story is Jesus is approached. He's challenged, right? He's like, Caesar demands that we should pay taxes. Should we pay taxes? Jesus asks very specifically, asked for a denarii. He's given He's given a denarii. He looks at the denarii and then he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to God what is God. Now we could say, okay, cool. Well, hold on. If you looked at the denarii during that time period that it claims to be in, it had Caesar's image in it. And it not only did it have Caesar's image, it said on the side around the coin, I forget the exact words, but it says Caesar was God. So we have an image of Caesar saying that he's God. He says, give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to God what is God. What are humans made in the image of? God. According to Jew. Yeah. So Jewish culture, this is why it was it answered the question, give to Caesar what is Caesar, what's made in his image, give to God what is God. Right? Now here's the thing. During the Hellenization of Judea, they refused to have anything made in any images because of their fear of breaking the first commandment or the second commandment. You shall not have any barren, you shall not make any images in God, right? So what happened was the Romans had to make new coins, right, for the Jews. So they had coins that had no images on them, nothing of Caesar, nothing. They were blank coins. They were coins meant only for money, except for guess what kind of coin?
Caesar's? For taxes?
Denarii.
I don't know.
The denarii.
Okay.
Right. So Jesus specifically asked for a denarii, which was the only coin in Judea that would have had an image on it. Every other coin wouldn't. And it very specifically during this time period said Caesar was God on that coin. Okay. How did they know this? How did they know this unless they were there?
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I think an educated person could have known some of these things. Like
Well, you got to remember they don't have. So right now here, I challenge you to do this.
okay.
I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off. Tell me if did I.
No, it's good.
Okay. So I challenge you to do this. I want you to write a story about. Where do you live?
And Germany.
Germany. I want you to write a story about Germany 50 years ago. And I want you to make sure that you get the currency absolutely correct in and how it was used, what exactly they had, what its value was.
Yeah, it's the
And I
mark.
want you to do that. I want you to do that without going to a library and without using Google.
Yeah, but maybe they had some books, or I think it's the Deutsche Mark. I know what the coin was. It's the mark 50 years ago. It's not very hard to know.
Okay, do you know exactly what the image was on the coin?
No, that would be
Because
very hard.
because I know like in Canada, we change our images on our coins frequently.
Yeah, no, I don't know that.
Right. So again, unless he was there, how did he know the image that was on the coin?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe people commented this. I don't know. It doesn't seem like super hard to know. Also, when maybe he did manage to do some research, with books or normal education material. They did.
All
He
four
didn't
of the
have
Gospels
Wikipedia,
did that?
but yeah, they were written by literally highly educated individuals, so they will have some form of education.
Well, John is
You know,
specifically known to have
but yeah,
grammatical issues. Oh no,
okay.
that's the Book of Revelation. That's my bad. I'll take that back. Just real quick. Upsy comes in. What did I learn losing from the debate with Alex? Just go watch my video on what I regret from the debate with Alex I put out, and you'll learn what I learned. Yeah. So I don't think that's likely. I think the narrative that you're saying is that we have these four authors that were highly educated, deeply studied the culture, and then started inventing stories, specifically using these small undesigned coincidences to invent a narrative about a person that they didn't actually believe in, didn't actually believe did these things. I think is less likely to say that these people were actually there, recorded events that they actually seen, and that's it. Like my hypothesis has less what do you call it, conclusions. Sorry, it's simpler. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, but also I'm not entirely say that these stories were made up like 100%. It could be that there is a historical core that a real Jesus actually lived, and some of these events were like based on real events, and then legend kind of got added to it. So maybe that's where the undesigned concepts come from also.
Okay, but what evidence do you have of that?
That's an hypothesis that explains the same evidence that you have.
No, it doesn't explain the evidence of the undesigned coincidences, right? You have to insert that there's some sort of malicious intent if they're inventing these stories of the undesigned coincidences.
No, I think if they draw from the same oral tradition or from the same core, then undesigned coincidences could arise like naturally in the text.
Right. So then you'd have to say that all of these events happened, but then the miracles that were on these events weren't there in the original. And as like people got it down the road, they added the miracles on. My question for you is, what is your evidence of that?
Well, the reason why I say this is because obviously as a skeptic, one would say because miracles don't happen or because they're unlikely, It's not that, what's the specific evidence of adding miracles? I don't think there is textual evidence that the miracles got added later,
Right.
But, a skeptic would say that because miracles are so unlikely, then this explanation becomes more likely. The naturalistic explanation becomes more likely than the miracle.
Right. So basically, you have a dogma of naturalism, and what you've done is you have, and that's fine. I have dogmas too, but you have a dogma of naturalism, and then instead of taking the evidence at its face value and just listening to the evidence, well, you say, I don't believe in miracles, so therefore I'm going to reinvent a narrative. I'm going to gin up an apologetic around the evidence to explain it. This is what often apologists get critiqued for, is that there's an issue with the Bible. Christians will invent an apologetic to make the Bible make sense. And it's like, well, see, you're just making excuses for your dogma.
Okay, but I don't think this is a very strange, invented scenario, like super contrary, that there was some story, that some legends like developed. We know, because we know that it happens sometimes. We have historical examples of legends that have appeared, and so it's not like super weird scenario. So it will be then an hypothesis that explains the data without saying that miracles exist. And for example, yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
What David Hume says, some Bible about miracles, it's not like, we just assume that miracles can happen. He says that the bulk of our experience shows that miracles don't happen. And he also says that there are too many miracles that have already been disproved. Like when we look at miracles, a lot of the time, or psychic, or we look scam, hoax, scam. So, and he says this, we have looked at so many miracles that ended up being scams and fakes, and that if we get a new claim miracle, then it's more likely to be also a hoax or a fake. That's kind of what he says.
The problem with David Hume is he also has dogma too. He said that if God existed, we would expect to see God reveal himself to us in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Jesus Christ?
It's the Son of God.
Right.
God,
so is God revealing to us himself to us? Right. Yeah. So like David Hume rejects the miracle right off its face value. So it's a counterfeit money explanation. Of course there's counterfeit money out there. I could spend more time disproving counterfeit money than I can proving the real money exists. But we know real money exists, right? I have real money, you have real money. We know it. We don't have to fight that. But that doesn't change the fact that there is counterfeit money out there. So just because there's counterfeit miracles doesn't mean that there is no miracles. I think we actually have a large amount of evidence for miracles. And I think one of the biggest ones is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Anthony Flew, which was another atheist philosopher, says the most convincing miracle in history, if he was ever going to be convinced of one, would be Jesus Christ's resurrection.
I see. Cameron from Capturing Christianity says is the Marian apparition of sight. You watched that video?
Fatima? Yeah, I think Fatima is a really strong miracle too. I believe in that miracle.
Okay. I see. Yeah. Okay. There is another issue about John. Just one last thing.
Mm-hmm.
There is a contradiction in John about when the cleansing of the temple happened. You know what I'm talking about?
John the cleansing of the temple or Jesus Christ
the cleansing of the temple. John says it happened early in the ministry, and the synoptics says this happened later, like just before his arrest.
I haven't looked into that one.
Okay. I just wanted to ask because there are different theories. Okay.
Yeah, sure. There's different theories. Okay. Most contradictions can be explained when we start looking at them. But even if that was a contradiction, I think that creates more of a problem with you, because again, with those undesigned coincidences, you're expecting John to know the Gospels.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Why did he contradict them? Because one will ask why. I think maybe he just didn't care. Who says that the audience of John, a specific Christian community, who says they knew Matthew or Mark? Maybe they didn't even knew it. Maybe John was writing for some specific group of people who hadn't heard of the other Gospels. And John, I don't know, he just didn't care very much.
I think that's a problem, because if you look at church history, according to church history, there was an issue of Docetism. So the church fathers requested that John write John because of that issue of Docetism. He wanted to solidify that God was Jesus had an actual body and presence. And then, so he would have been part of the church father community. Christianity's a lot bigger at this point. It's a lot growing, because this would be after Nero's persecution and the burning of the Christians. The writing of it, if we take the later dating according to would that be before or after? I'm going to retract what I said. I'm going to have to double check that. I think it was before. Okay. But anyways, we do have the growth of Christianity that's happening at this point. So John is amongst Christians. James is one of the, again, according to church culture, James is one of the leaders of the churches. And then all of a sudden he's going to write a gospel that knows all these little details about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but just doesn't care if he completely contradicts like a big thing, like a cleansing of the temple.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, but he didn't care. He just didn't. There is a thing with John. Miley Kona said John is like the problem child. He said John has a unique way sometimes to write things. That's why, it's the synoptics and John. Like sometimes John likes to write things differently. I don't know why. I'm
What
not
do you
sure
think?
why he will.
Okay, so what do you think is more likely though? If we're to take miracles, let's say neither one of they don't talk about miracles in this hypothetical.
Okay, sure.
We have John, who's got all these little details correct about Matthew, Mark, and Luke. He gets all these small details right, but then it gets these big things wrong. So what is the most likely hypothesis in this scenario? It's that John is operating from his memory and might have remembered it differently.
Okay.
Or two, he's copying from these other gospels and then intentionally changes the story for whatever reason that we're not even sure why.
Okay.
What is the more likely hypothesis?
I don't see how can you remember this differently. For example, the specific thing, the cleansing of the temple is a big event. And in one gospel, it was early in the ministry. And in the other one, I think it's so close to his arrest that many say that this is what led to the arrest. People will remember it like, yeah, Jesus cleansed the temple, and then very close, a few days later, he gets arrested. So that's not something like that. You can't get it mixed up in your memory. Oh, I think it was 3 at the beginning.
Why not?
There it's too difficult. Like, I don't know. It seems it's too big the event is too big. I don't know. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing you can mix up.
Maybe John's not writing chronologically.
Yeah, that's an option. That's one of the harmonizations. There are two harmonizations. One is that John is not writing chronologically, but he moved the cleansing of the temple for theological reasons. And the second one is that there were actually 2 cleansings of the temple. That this event happened twice, and John is recording one cleansing, and the synopsis the second one.
I don't agree. Actually, I don't think he did that twice.
Yeah, that's what actually Spanish philosophy. I don't agree either. But in Spanish philosophy thinks this is the answer. He has a full video about this. But I think the way to solve this harmonization, it feels a bit too forced, like too weird. It's clear. Everyone knows that the cleansing of the temple happened once,
Yeah. So to me, when I have those two hypotheses, it seems like the simpler hypothesis is John is recording from his memory and his understanding of what happened, rather than he is copying from these other documents and then choosing just to completely ignore certain things. That seems like a less likely hypothesis to me.
Yeah, but I don't think if John contradicted Mark, what will happen to John? I think nothing. I don't think nothing. People wouldn't complain about.
But why would he do it?
Like maybe he didn't. Okay, why did he do it? He just wanted to narrate things that way from some reason. It's hard to speculate on this. But
there has to be a reason or a purpose.
Well, scholars says there are theological reasons. There is a symbolic meaning about Jesus doing this early at this ministry. I forgot at the moment. I can't remember what's the reason, but there is one. Scholars have one.
So one thing I'll say though is like Bart Ehrman is on record saying that he doesn't believe that the Gospels are written chronologically.
Yeah.
Like, so for example, he doesn't think Matthew is written in the steps of all the events that happen, but he thinks the Sermon on the Mount happened. He doesn't think it happened all on one time in a mountain. Yeah. So this is one of those things that he said. So it's very possible that John was chronologically correct and one of the other Gospels was chronologically incorrect because they didn't care about the chronological value.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, we have all these hypotheses that we're putting on the table. Why are you assuming the malicious intent?
No, I'm not assuming malicious intent. I think the thing is the 3 Gospels place it around the same time. So if they were wrong, they have to get wrong in the same way. They have to make the same mistake.
I got to stop you there. If you're not assuming malicious intent, then why don't you believe in miracles?
Or do you mean malicious intent, like to the intent to deceive the other, right? To write a lie.
Clearly, there's an intent to lie for whatever reason. There's malicious intent. So why is it that we assume the malicious intent narrative? Like my question for you is, would you assume malicious intent if no miracles were involved?
No, I don't think so. No.
Right.
No, I wouldn't.
So what I'm saying is, it seems like you and a lot of atheists is that you have to make it so it's not a miracle, rather than taking on at face value, taking on how most of history is done, to giving the principle of charity, you have to make it so it's not a miracle because you guys don't believe in miracles. And if it has to come down to the fact that they are just lying for whatever reason, then they're just lying for whatever reason.
The reason is to sell their sect to outsiders, to get followers in their cult. I think, you say how history is done.
Okay, so let's do that one. They're doing it to sell their cult. What kind of God would Jesus be to these outside Gentiles?
A dying and rising God?
Yeah. So how would they have seen Jesus?
Like a dying and rising God, like others. There were other, like Osiris, or there were other gods that die and then rise.
So Jesus would have been a humiliated God. This is why we see that graffiti of Jesus in the cave with his head cut off, and they put a bull's head on top of him, right up on the cross. Is this would not have been a God that people wanted to follow, very simply because in Roman Greco culture, people didn't follow based off of love and kindness. They followed based off of honor and pride. You followed the strongest person, not the most humble person. Jesus would not have been a good God to invent for a narrative to start a cult.
Okay, but there are other gods that die. The skeptics say that, I'm not a fan of mythicist theory, but skeptics say that there are dying and rising gods, that there are many similarities with Jesus and the other.
They're really not, though.
Okay.
There's not. And a lot of these dying and rising gods, they come after Jesus.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. No, but you also mentioned it, how history is done. But, last time we talked about this. If we have an historical criteria for a document that says, okay, Joe built a house. Okay, you cannot tell me that if the document says Joe lived a mountain, that the historic criteria is going to be exactly the same. Like if the historic criteria here is good, then it's good is enough here as well, because it doesn't seem reasonable to me,
Right. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, okay.
Right. If you have one document that says that, but that's not the case with the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We have several documents. We have several eyewitness attestation. We have a whole huge cultural change in events. We have people that were willing to be martyred and die for this belief. So if we had something that Bob built a house, okay, we could believe that. That's fine. If you have something that says Bob moved a mountain, probably not going to believe that. If it says Bob moved a mountain, then I have another document that says Bob moved a mountain. Then another document that says Bob moved, and then another document that says Bob moved a mountain.
But it's not independent. But
that's fine.
Are they independent, or are they? Or there's one and the others obviously
they're all connected. That's fine. So we have these four documents, but from four sources. In those four sources, we have 21 eyewitnesses to Bob moving a mountain.
But if one source says we had 1 million eyewitnesses, then do you have 1 million eyewitnesses?
So if we have 21 named witnesses.
Okay, in those things. One source.
So hold on. Let me finish. Okay. We have 21 named witnesses in these sources. Those 21 named witnesses, out of those 21 named witnesses, we have a few others that are named in other contemporary sources. So we know that these are real people. We can date these documents to the time that Bob would have moved the mountain, right? If we start doing the same criteria that we see for Jesus Christ and his death and resurrection, I would probably believe that Bob moved the mountain.
Yeah, okay. I will believe that there's something weird happened and a legend appeared, and these documents recorded it somehow, because it's just too extraordinary. It will be too extraordinary for me.
Yeah, it's because you're pride.
Yeah, it goes back to what I said. Yeah, it goes back to what we said before about a miracle being so unlikely, it's just so unlikely or not. But if you believe in God, then I guess it's less unlikely for you than it's possible that it's a miracle happening,
Right. So it's your priors, right? That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. It doesn't matter the evidence that we put forward. I could give you all the evidence in the world. If I gave you 1,000 documents that all said Jesus Christ from different sources, from different people, they all said that Jesus Christ resurrected. They are not connected, right? Would you believe Jesus Christ rose from the dead?
Your ancient documents, I don't know. But if 1,000 people, if I wake up one day and everybody is telling me that they saw an alien, but literally everybody, like half people, like everyone, okay, I will believe it.
Okay, do you believe in aliens? Because we have probably over 1,000 people who have said they've seen aliens.
Yeah. No, but in a different way, like the same, like the very same day. Okay, that's a good point, but it will be like the same day. Everyone
Okay,
is saying,
then you should believe
yesterday.
Then you should believe the Mary apparition, the Fatima, because we have over 1,000 people in the very same day witnessing the sun dance through the sky.
Oh, but there are, that's very weird. Yeah, okay. No, but we don't have 1,000 individual. I don't think we have 1,000 individual claims. But I will have to take a look at it. But I think skeptics have answers to this. I think what I meant to say is that if you wake up one day, and right now, everyone I see is telling me this. Okay, that there are two options. There were actually an alien, or the entire world just made a giant conspiracy to prank me, and that's unlikely at some point. So at some point, I would believe the testimony.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about priors, right? So what is the likelihood that God exists?
Oh, I don't know. Let's say 50-50, maybe.
You think it's 50-50?
Maybe. I don't know.
Then you should give the historic reportage model a 50-50 shot. You don't give it a 50-50 shot. Because if God has a 50-50 chance of existing, it's a 50-50 chance that Jesus Christ rose from the dead.
Well, no, because I can't grant you deism, a God, a creator God of the universe, but this doesn't get you to Jesus automatically, because
I'm not even saying it gives you Jesus. I'm just saying if a God of the universe exists, what's the likelihood miracles could happen?
No, you don't know, because maybe it's a God that doesn't like to do miracles in the world.
That's fine. He cannot like it. Okay, if God doesn't exist, what are the chances miracles can happen?
0.
Pretty much 0. Okay, if God does exist, what are the chances miracles can happen? Not would, can.
Well, you mean 100%? Is that what you're on?
Right.
Because it depends. But what if it's a deist God that specifically doesn't want to interfere in the world? Then the chances are 0
that's would.
Also.
That's would, right? That's not
that's
can.
a case.
Right. So
that's a
the question is, if God exists, could he do these miracles? The answer is yes.
Yes.
So if you're giving a 50-50 chance to God, then you got to give a 50-50 chance to these miracles, because they could be from God. Would he or would he not? You have to look at the data, but you're not giving it that fair chance. You're saying it's so unlikely, no matter how much is presented, I'm not going to believe.
Okay, but it's not 50-50 resurrection, because you have 50-50 God, and then you have another filter, which is a God that specifically is willing to do miracles in the world. You know what I mean? Like
right. I still don't think you understand what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm talking about the possibility of it happening.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's a 50-50 chance that God exists, it's a 50-50 chance
Yeah.
that these miracles could happen. Because if God doesn't exist, then they cannot happen. If God does exist, then it can happen. It's a 50-50 shot, right? Then it's 50% it could happen, 50% it couldn't happen. Whether it would are two different things.
Okay, but possibility and probabilities are two different concepts.
Right, I'm talking about possibility, not probability.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, bro. You're lovely. I just got some other people in the queue, and we've been talking for a while.
Okay. Thank you for having me again.
Of course, man. And I'll have you more. I know you'll want to come up again, so we'll talk again later.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you.
God bless.
Bye.
Congratulations. You made it to the end of the video. If you want to watch more, you can click one of these and you can keep watching.